worship Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Meholal Patishbachot. Please be seated. So, I have spoken about the following already in my weekly column in our newsletter, but I would like to expand on my ideas about this week's parasha in the light of the terror attack in Sydney just for a moment. When we read the news this week, something broke. It was not just the heartbreaking loss of life in Sydney, it was the shattering of our illusion of order. We navigate our days with a silent, necessary contract with the universe. We assume that if we are vigilant, if we are good, if we are careful, we will be safe. Violence that erupts in ordinary places, a beach or a synagogue, tears that contract to pieces. It leaves us feeling exposed. It leaves us asking where God is in this chaos. It is a question that challenges our reading of Parashat Mikeitz, our weekly Torah portion. On the surface, the story of Joseph is the ultimate narrative of order. It is a story of perfect timing. Pharaoh dreams, the cupbearer remembers, Joseph is summoned, and in a span of a few verses, the prisoner becomes the prime minister. As we read on, Joseph himself will later articulate a theology of perfect providence, telling his brothers that their action was merely instruments in the divine plan to save lives. We are often tempted to reach for this theology when tragedy strikes. We hear people say that everything happens for a reason, or that God has a plan. It is a comforting thought because it suggests that someone is in control. It suggests that the suffering is not random, but a necessary chapter in a story with a happy ending. But at the end of a week like this, such a theology feels not only hollow, but morally dangerous. If the terror in Sydney is part of a divine plan, then God is cruel. If the death of innocents is a necessary plot point for some future redemption, we are right to return the ticket. We cannot worship a puppeteer who sacrifices human beings on the altar of a mysterious will. To find a deeper, more honest, progressive Jewish response, we must look closer at the text we read this morning. We must look at Joseph before he offers his polished theology. In Genesis chapter 42, Joseph is not a sage. He is a man intoxicated by the power to finally control his own story. Let us be clear. Joseph is not a terrorist. He is a victim of profound trauma who has finally gained the power to endure. He is never hurt again. His actions are not driven by a desire to destroy, but by a desperate need to engineer a specific outcome. When his brothers arrive in Egypt, Joseph holds all the cards. He recognizes them, but they do not recognize him. He creates an elaborated theater of manipulation. He accuses them of being spies. He imprisons them. He binds Shimeon before their eyes. He is writing a script, and he is forcing his brothers to play their parts. Joseph is trying to play God because he believes that through power and fear, he can force the world finally to be right. But then something changes. The mask slips. At the very end of our first scroll reading, in verse 18, Joseph releases his brothers from the prison. He stands before the men who sold him and says 5 words that change the path of the story. Ed ha Elohim ani yareh. I fear God. This is the pivot point. To fear God is to acknowledge that you are not God. In that moment, Joseph realizes the limits of his script. He realizes that he cannot manipulate people into goodness. He cannot control the past. He cannot force the future. He is subject to a moral law that is higher than his Egyptian throne. He stops playing the puppeteer and starts acting as a moral agent. He sends them back, his brothers back, with food, and he offers them a path, but he leaves the choice to them. This is where we find our answer to the darkness of this week. We are not characters in a pre-written script. The terrorists in Sydney were not agents of God's will. They were agents of human evil. They choose to destroy, which is the ultimate rejection of the divine. We must be firm in our theology. God does not want evil. God does not use tragedy to teach us a lesson or permit suffering to further a secret agenda. God's vision for this world is one of unyielding justice and radical peace. It is a vision where every life is treated as an image of the divine. And terror can never be an expression of the divine plan, because terror is the opposite of God. The pit of violence is not dug by the divine. It is dug by human cruelty. And we must stop looking for God in the design of a tragedy and start looking for God in our absolute refusal to accept evil. This Shabbat is Shabbat Hanukkah. The coincidence of the calendar brings us the festival of light at the very moment we feel the encroaching darkness. Hanukkah offers us a counter-narrative to the logic of terror. Terror relies on might and power to dictate a script of suspicion and hatred. It seeks to make us feel small and helpless in the face of chaos. But the light of the Chanukiah tells us a different story. Resilience is not a passive waiting for the next chapter of the plan. Resilience is an active rebellion against despair. It is the decision to light a candle knowing full well that a single flame cannot eliminate all the darkness in the world. We light it anyway. We light it because the flame itself is a declaration that the darkness does not have the final word. By lighting that flame, we stop being characters in someone else's script and start being authors of our own moral response. We cannot control the chaos that others inflict upon the world. We are not the playwrights of history. Like Joseph, we must eventually admit that we are not in control of the macrocosm, but we are in control of our response. We can choose, as Joseph finally did, to act with humanity rather than manipulation. We can choose to be people who fear God, because people who recognize the infinite value in every life and the moral imperative are here to protect the good. Let us not offer cheap consolation that explain away the pain. The pain is real. The loss is real. There is no secret reason for it. But there is a response to it. The challenge of this Shabbat is to reject the paralysis of despair. We do not justify the suffering, but we do determine what comes next. So, please, may this Shabbat bring comfort to all who are grieving, and may it strengthen our resolve to build a world where safety is not a miracle, but a birthright. Shabbat Shalom.